This is Mrs. Naslund, and today we'll be doing Unit 11, Lesson 3, Compare Decimals to the Hundredths. Our learning objective for today is I can write and compare decimals in tenths and hundredths. So, the first thing I'm going to have us do is we're going to review our place value. So if we look at this number here, remember that we have, if we look at the red, we have 4 hundredths, 3 tens, 2 ones, and then we have our decimal point, and this is what we're really focusing on, our fractions. We have 5 tenths, 6 hundredths, and 7 thousandths. And if I was going to write those out as a fraction, I would actually write, let's say I was going to write 5 tenths out. I would do 5 over 10, and I would say that as 5 tenths. And a good trick, remember, when we see the fraction is we count our zeros, and then we just move it over that to get to the decimal. So there was 1 0, so I'd start behind the 5, and I'd move over, and we'd end up with 0.5. Okay, so let's keep that in mind as we try these next couple of ones here. So let's look at this. They want us to write what comes next. So we have 4 hundredths, again looking over 2 over the hundredths, 5 hundredths, 6 hundredths. What comes next? And the answer would be 7 hundredths. All right. Then go down to this one. We're at 1 and 21 hundredths, 1 and 22 hundredths, 1 and 23 hundredths. What do you think will come next? Go ahead and pause and write it down. All right, if you got 1 and 24 hundredths, you were right on. Okay, now let's look at the next problem here. We've got 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths. The next one is going to be 4 tenths. All right, great work. So remember, right after the decimal is tenths and then hundredths. That's going to be really important as we continue. All right, now it wants us to compare decimals and decide which one is greater than and which one is less than. And there's a really good trick to help with this. So we're going to first try to compare these two numbers. We have 6 tenths and 6 hundredths. So here's my trick. You rewrite the decimals, and it takes time, but I promise taking this extra time is going to save you a lot as we get into more longer decimal numbers. So I rewrite these, and then you're going to check it just like you were in alphabetical order. Okay, so I start over here and I say, okay, zeros, they're the same. Now I go here and I go, oh, I've got a 6 tenths and a 0. Any number that comes here is going to be bigger than this number. So if I got a 6 here and a 0 here, I know right away that 6 tenths is bigger because 6 is bigger than 0. Okay, let's go ahead and try another one here. Let's look at the next one. We'll look at 4 hundredths, so we have 0.40, and we have 4 tenths. Okay, now I look at this and I start with my zeros and I say, oh, zeros are the same? Ah, 4s are the same, but then there's a 0. But you know, here's the trick. If 0 doesn't actually mean anything, it's just a place value, it doesn't mean anything. I could actually add a 0 here if I wanted to. It doesn't mean anything. So really when I look at this, what I get is that they're the same. This is the exact same number. They just wrote it a little different. They put it as 4 hundredths instead of 4 tenths. But guess what? 4 hundredths is the same as 4 tenths. Okay, they're equal. All right, let's try this next one here. We have 9 hundredths, 0.09. And right below it, I'm going to write the 9 tenths, 0.9. Again, I start over and I work from my left to my right. I start here and say, oh, 0 and 0, same, don't worry about it. But then I get here, 0 and 9, which one's bigger? 9 is bigger. So which of these two is bigger? The 9 tenths is bigger than 9 hundredths. Okay? All right. All right, now it's your turn to practice. Let's compare these two numbers, 4 tenths and 2 tenths. So I'm going to go ahead and write those out for you. Again, you always want to write them above each other. And then I want you to compare. All right, so on your whiteboard, I want you to write them like this. And then I want you to think, which one is greater? Go ahead and try to figure that out on your own. All right. If you looked at this and you said 0 and 0 are the same, cross those off, and then I look here and I'm like, oh, well, 4 is definitely bigger than 2, so we would say that 4/10 is greater than 2/10. All right, let's try another one. Let's go ahead and try this one on your own. Go ahead and compare 8/10 to 9/10. So go ahead and write it on your board. Let's see how you did. All right, so you should have written 0.8 over 0.9. Now, sometimes have kids who just say, I just know the answer. I don't want to write it out, Mrs. Nass. I don't want to write it above each other. But you need to do it because they're going to start getting very tricky very soon. And we're just practicing the skills. So write it out this way and let's compare. 0 and 0 are the same. And then I come to 8 and 9. Well, which one's bigger? 9/10 is bigger. So I'm going to say, we're looking at these two. 9/10 is bigger than 8/10. Ignore that one. Let's try that one next because that's going to be different. All right, let's do this one. Oh, I just showed you the answer. That's all right. We'll see that 8/10, if I go ahead and line it up, I'll show you that 0.8, 8/10, and then I do 0.09, and you'll see that if you wouldn't have lined them up, you may not have caught it. But when I do this, I can cross off my zeros, and then I go here and I'm like, oh, 8 is bigger than 0. Even though there's a 9 here, it doesn't matter. 8 is bigger than 0. So 8/10 is bigger than 9/100ths. Okay, even though 9 is a normally bigger number, when we have that 0 there, we're saying that it's smaller. No matter what, it's smaller than 8/10. All right, let's go ahead and do some other types of problems that practice the same thing. So in this one, it says, in the situation below, each person is traveling the same distance. Write a decimal number to represent the distance each person has traveled. So Aki has traveled 3/10 of the distance, and Stephen has traveled 5/10 of the distance. So when I read something like this, I like to write it out as a fraction. 3/10 of the distance, and Stephen has traveled 5/10 of the distance. And remember, when we write it out like that, we can use our zeros to help us figure out where our decimal place goes. So there was 1 0 here, so I'm going to write my 3, and I get to move it over 1 spot. So I move it right there, add my 0, and there we have 3/10. How about this one? We have 5/10. I write my 5. I count my zeros. In this case, I only have 1 0. So move it over 1 spot, put my decimal, and add my 0. So I have 5/10. All right. Now I'm going to have you give it a shot on number 2. Same idea. Read it, write the decimal, and then you'll see, read it, write the fraction, and let's see if you can put it into a decimal form. So here's what it says. Jose has traveled 25/100ths of the distance, and Lakeisha has traveled 18/100ths of the distance. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can write it first as a fraction, and then convert it into a decimal. All right, so for Jose, I would have done 25 over 100, and for Lakeisha, I would have written 18 over 100. All right, and then I would count my zeros and use that to help me figure out my fraction. So in this case, I count my zeros. There's 1, 2. I'm going to rewrite this number. So 25, and then I counted 2 zeros. So I'm going to start behind the 25, where my decimal spot is, and I go 1, 2, add my decimal, and add my 0. So there's 25/100ths. And then I'll do the same thing with 18. I'm going to write my 18. I count my zeros, 1, 2, I go 1, 2. You can also use, if you memorize that the hundredth is 2 over, you know that it's going to end in that hundredths place value, okay? So that's another way you can do it. All right, down here is more comparing. This is the same thing we did on that last page. Again, the trick is to go ahead and line them up. So let's go 4/10, so 0.4 over 4/100ths, 0.04, right? Then I go ahead and to compare them, I go ahead and start at the zeros and say, oh, same. And I go here, oh, 4 is definitely bigger than 0. So I know that 4/10 is greater than 4/100. All right, on this next one, I want you to do it yourself. So use your whiteboard, go ahead and compare and decide which one you think is bigger, 61/100 or 8/10. All right, let's see how you did. So again, I'm going to put them on top of each other. You have 61/100, and then below it, I'm going to do 8/10. All right, and I compare. 0 and 0 are the same. Look here, I have a 6 and 8. What's bigger? 8. So if you said 8/10 is bigger, great work. All right, we're going to go on to our last page for the day. All right, so these are some word problems that practice the same thing. So this one says, the Cruz family is enjoying a 10-day vacation. So far, they've been vacationing for 1 week. What decimal number represents the part of their vacation that is past? So they've been there for 1 week. Kind of a hidden question because they have to know how many days are in a week. We know there are 7 days in the week, and they're going to be gone a total of 10 days. So I'm going to write that as a fraction. They have had 7 days of their vacation. They've got 10 days total. So once I get that written out, then it's easy to put it in decimal form because remember, I count my zeros, I write my 7, and I count my zeros. There's 1 0, and I move over 1 spot. So they've been gone for 7/10 of their vacation. Now the question is, the next one says, what decimal number represents the part of their vacation that remains? Well, if they've been gone for 7 days and they're going to be gone for a total of 10, I'm going to figure out how many days are left. So they've been gone for 7, they have 8, 9, 10. They've got 3 days left. So they have 3 of 10 days left. Again, I use my trick. I go ahead and write my 3. I count my zeros. I've got 1, and I'm going to move it over. So they've got 3/10 of their vacation left. All right, this time I want you to try it. Jeremy spent 3/4 and 1 nickel at the school bookstore. What decimal part of $1 did he spend? So first you're going to have to add up how much you have. You've got 3/4, that's 25 cents a piece. So 25 times 3 or 3/4 is 75 cents. Plus 1 nickel, which is 5 cents. 75 plus 5 is 80. So they've spent 80 cents. And how many cents are in $1? You said 100? Great work. There's 100 cents in a dollar. So I've done 80 of $1. And now they want you to put that into a decimal. So go ahead and put that into a decimal. Let's see how you do. All right, so again, our trick is I'm going to go ahead and write that 80 because that's my top number. And then I count my zeros. In this case, I have 2 zeros, 1, 2. So I'm going to move over 1, 2, put my 0 there. So they have spent 80 cents so far. Okay. All right. 2 more things to review here. First, I want you to review writing something in word form. So let's go ahead and just review what these would be. If I look at this, I think, okay, this is my 10th spot. So I'm going to say, if I had to write this in word form, this is my 10th spot and this is my hundredths. So in this case, I have 1/10. In this case, it's not tenths this time, it's in the hundredth spot. So I'm going to say they have 9 hundredths. All right, go ahead and try this one right here on your own. How would you write that? All right, if you said 5/10, oops, there we go, got both at once. You said 5/10, right on. Now they want us to write this in decimal form. And again, a good trick for this is to go ahead and write it out, 14 hundredths. So I'm going to do 14 over 100. And then I can use my zeros trick to help me figure it out. So I have 2 zeros. So I'm going to move it over 2 spots, 1, 2. So I should end up with 0.14 or 14 hundredths. All right, why don't you go ahead and try writing 8/10 on your own. All right, so I would write 8 over 10. And then I have my 1 0, but I'm going to write my 8 first. I'm going to go over 1 0 worth and my 0, so I have 8/10. Great work today. So today we learned how to compare numbers to the tenths and hundredths.